All right, welcome to today's Explainer. We're diving straight into what is honestly one of the most fascinating historical cold cases out there, investigating the most enigmatic suspects of the ancient world. We're looking at a period in time where human civilization was thriving, trade was absolutely booming, and then, almost in the blink of an eye, everything went dark. Today we're investigating the Bronze Age collapse and the mysterious confederacy of warriors known as the Sea Peoples.
So, what wiped out the most advanced civilizations of the ancient world? It's a question that's been driving historians and archaeologists crazy for centuries, because right around 1200 BCE, the thriving, deeply interconnected empires of the Late Bronze Age just fell apart, violently. We aren't talking about some slow, gradual decline over centuries here. We are talking about a catastrophic systems collapse. It happened with terrifying speed, literally erasing centuries of human progress in just a few decades.
Section 1. The scene of the crime, the Late Bronze Age collapse. To really understand this mystery, we've got to look at the world during the height of the Bronze Age. We're talking incredibly advanced maritime trade, complex writing systems, and the mastery of bronze weaponry. It was a thriving, globalized world, well, at least for the Mediterranean.
But the sheer scale of the devastation is staggering. In a shockingly rapid window, all of these magnificent civilizations were decimated. The mighty Hittite Empire in modern-day Turkey, completely destroyed. The Mycenaeans in Greece, gone. Thriving Canaanite coastal cities were devastated and abandoned. Even the mighty Egyptian Empire, which barely managed to survive, by the way, had its economy and power permanently crippled. These great cities were either reduced to struggling little villages or just entirely wiped off the map.
Section 2. The Prime Suspects. Enter the Sea Peoples. Across the scattered surviving records of these fallen empires, one terrifying thread keeps popping up. Mentions of ruthless, seafaring attackers. Enter our prime suspects for the end of the world as they knew it.
Now here's a crazy detail. The Sea Peoples never actually called themselves that. There's no ancient inscription officially naming a unified coalition as the Sea Peoples. It's actually a modern umbrella term coined way back in 1881 by a French Egyptologist named Gaston Maspero. The ancient records themselves, they just vaguely describe these invaders as coming from the sea or the islands. In reality, we're looking at a loose confederation of completely different tribes. Actually, scratch that. It's more like a massive, desperate coalition.
Modern historians have been working overtime to match the disparate tribes named in Egyptian records with their likely Mediterranean homelands. Think of it like a Bronze Age suspect lineup. You've got the Shurden, who are linked to the island of Sardinia based on their horned helmets and weaponry. Then there's the Peliset. Most historians agreed these guys eventually became the Philistines. The Luca probably came from Lycia in western Anatolia. The Shekelesh might have ties to Sicily, and the Aquesh and Denyon, they're tentatively linked to the ancient Greeks, the Achaeans from the Homeric epics. So this was a massive, incredibly diverse coalition coming from literally all corners of the Mediterranean.
Section 3. The Witness Accounts, Battles with the Pharaohs. To figure out how they operated and track their destructive actions, we have to look at the primary witnesses of the era. And the absolute best records we have come from the great pharaohs of Egypt who meticulously documented their desperate wars against this coalition.
These waves of attacks didn't just happen overnight. They escalated over an entire century. The incursions kicked off as early as 1278 BCE under Ramses the Great, really ramped up 30 years later under Merimta, and finally culminated in an absolute do-or-die fight for survival under Ramses III around 1180 BCE.
Let's zoom in on that first major clash. Early on in his reign, Ramses II actually laid a brilliant trap for the Shurden warships. He let their fleet sail right up to the mouth of the Nile, where his defensive forces were just waiting in the wings. He ambushed them from the flanks, absolutely destroying their ships. But here is the wild part. Ramses was so impressed by how fiercely they fought that he actually hired the survivors. He pressed these captured pirates right into his own army. They even served as his elite royal bodyguards at the famous Battle of Kadesh.
But, the threat didn't stop there. Decades later, in 1209 BCE, Pharaoh Merimta was facing a much larger coalition. He claimed to have slain over 6,000 Sea Peoples and their Libyan allies at the Battle of Pi Afir. But in the aftermath of that battle, Merimta noticed something super weird. These invaders hadn't just brought weapons with them. They had brought household goods and building tools. That is a massive clue about their true motives.
By the time of Ramesses III in 1180 BCE, the Sea Peoples had already wiped out the Hittite Empire and were marching straight for Egypt by land and sea. It was a massive threat. Ramses III knew a traditional field battle would be pure suicide,
So he executed a desperate but absolutely brilliant defensive strategy to crush the naval invasion. He used guerrilla tactics, hiding his best archers along the shoreline of the Nile Delta. When the enemy's ships got close, they just rained flaming arrows down onto the vessels, totally trapping them against the shore. After burning the fleet, he routed the surviving land forces at Zoes. Egypt was saved, but man, the effort completely drained the royal treasury.
Section 4. The twist. Victims of ancient propaganda? Which brings us to a crucial point. Were these raiders really the ruthless, bloodthirsty supervillains who single-handedly broke the Bronze Age? Or is there a twist to this historical narrative?
Well, look at the words carved into the Egyptian monuments. Ramses III used these highly theatrical, super boastful quotes, claiming they laid their hands upon the lands as far as the circuit of the earth. He paints them as this confident, world-conquering evil. But we really have to remember who's holding the chisel here. This is classic ancient propaganda, designed mostly to make Ramses' own victory look that much more heroic, like he was divinely ordained to save his people.
The Egyptians wanted you to see bloodthirsty sea pirates, hell-bent on world destruction. But modern archaeological and climatological evidence, it points to a totally different, honestly much more tragic reality. These were desperate migrants. We're talking about families fleeing severe environmental and systemic catastrophes.
Historians today widely agree that the Sea Peoples weren't the sole cause of the Bronze Age collapse. Actually, they were a devastating symptom of it. The real culprits were a perfect storm of interconnected disasters. We're looking at severe climate disruption, potentially triggered by volcanic activity, which caused widespread, years-long droughts and famine. Throw in a series of destructive earthquakes, new advancements in infantry warfare that basically made elite chariot armies completely obsolete, and the total collapse of their fragile, globalized trade networks. The Bronze Age world was essentially a house of cards, and the climate just pulled out the bottom row.
And if you want solid proof that this was a massive migration, and not just a military conquest, look closely at the Egyptians' own witness testimonies. Carved right into the walls of Ramses III's mortuary temple at Medinet Habu, the artists unwittingly documented the truth. The reliefs clearly show the Sea Peoples arriving with heavy ox carts, women, children, household goods, and cattle. I mean, a marauding pirate fleet does not bring their kids and cows on a raid. It proves they were climate refugees, uprooted from their homelands, desperately seeking survival in one of the only places left that still had grain, Egypt. So what actually happened to them? Their so-called terrifying reign didn't actually end in total annihilation. After being repulsed by Egypt, the Sea Peoples kind of just vanished from the historical record. Why? Because they simply integrated into the lands they migrated to. Groups like the Pelicids settled along the coast of Canaan and assimilated, eventually becoming the Philistines. They left the ashes of the Bronze Age behind them and just became part of the fabric of the new Iron Age world.
To wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a thought that kind of completely reframes how we look at the past. If the infamous civilization-destroying Sea Peoples were actually just desperate families trying to survive an environmental apocalypse, it makes you wonder, what other historical villains were just trying to weather the storm? And how much of the history we accept as absolute fact is nothing more than the beautifully carved propaganda of the victors? Thanks so much for joining me today. Keep asking questions, keep looking past the narrative, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.